Turning to football, of course, Jed, the recruiting situation kind of in a lull across the nation. Not a whole lot happening. Much is simmering. There are a lot of camps, the Under Armour camps and so forth going on over the last month to 6 weeks. Your thoughts about the Georgia 2026 class as it's rounding into form, and who are the big targets that are being talked about right now?
Yeah, they've only got, I think, 4 commits. 3, let me think, 3 on the offensive side of the ball, or 2 on the offensive side of the ball and 2 on the defense. So a couple defensive backs committed, which you expect with Kirby Smart. But yeah, I think the big one is Jared Curtis, a quarterback. He was a former Georgia commit for about 6 months, maybe, and he decommitted because he wanted to take other visits and didn't want to do it while he was committed, which is fair. But I think Georgia is still trending in a positive direction there. And then I think a big question for me is, how do you follow up a really good receiver class in 2025, which they've already got a top 100 guy committed in Vance Spafford from California? And can you land some studs on the offensive line? Because the offensive line classes the past couple of years have been good. I don't think they maybe were at the level of the 2017, 2018 classes. So do you really hit one of those home run classes along the offensive line? There's a lot of targets out there. They're in with Jackson Cantwell, who is the, I believe, #1 prospect for us on Rivals, and some other 5-star top 100 type guys. But being in it's great. Getting visits is great. You got to close on some of these guys. I think that's what's going to be interesting to see as spring visits shake out. Who do they really have a chance at? Who are we going to be looking at the end of April and say, these are the guys Georgia's actually got a shot to land?
And the thought is that ever since Kirby Smart got established there after about year 2, is that they've got a shot at anyone, that they pretty much have their selection process down and can get anyone. And of course, Georgia is probably the highest surging state in regards to talent on the upper end, where it used to be Texas, Florida, California third. Georgia's pretty much knocked California out of the way and become the third most prominent state. So it's, I'm sure, a strong recruiting class in state again, and you're not going to win all those battles. But anyone in particular to highlight, whether that in state or out of state, that is at the top of the wish list?
Yeah. Again, Cantwell is one. You look at, running back there after Derrek Cooper out of, I think he's from Miami, who was committed for like 3 days last summer. And then it was a whole, his mom went on Twitter and said he's not committed. It was a whole thing. But I think Georgia is in a good spot with him as well. He'll be back in Athens probably this spring, and then he's got an official visit set up. So those guys, I think receiver is one that's kind of a question mark. A bunch of offers went out this spring. I think it's going to be interesting. Or an area on defense they really need to look at is outside linebacker, edge, whatever, because they haven't really had those game record guys anyway. Like Jalen Walker was one. Michael Williams was kind of there, but never really was a consistent game wrecker, I guess. And then they had a bunch of guys transfer out. So they really need to rebuild that room. And there's a couple guys in state. Kamari Brooks is one. There's some guys out of state. I think of Rodney Dunham from North Carolina they really like. Xavion Griffin-Haynes is one. They've sent some new offers out. So I think that position on defense is, who can they get that will fit in Georgia's defense, can do all the stuff they ask those guys to do, set the edge against the run, whatever. But you got to get some guys that get sacks, or at least affect the passer at the end of the day. And I think that's an area of focus on defense in this class for sure.
Jed, as soon as you said game wrecker, I thought of the Super Bowl, because
Exactly.
I don't know if that was unprecedented in regards to, there are pictures all over social media and video of 3 Georgia linemen all lined up, and then obviously 4 starters on defense total. And I don't know if that's unprecedented, taking from one college football team to a Super Bowl championship offense or defense. But just to imagine, only 3 years ago, these guys were winning a national championship in college, and only 2 years ago, they were winning a national championship, another one in college, of course. And then you just take 2 years later and supplant them onto an NFL defense, and they're winning a Super Bowl championship only 2 years later. Is like guys in their mid-20s. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and you look at those championship teams, those defenses, like the defensive lines Georgia's had the past couple of years have been good, but I don't think you've had those like just dominant, consistent. Like Jalen Carter in 2022 was like just unstoppable, unblockable. Jalen Walker flashed that. Michael Williams occasionally flashed that. He battled injuries a lot. I don't know that they really had that guy that's just, you need him to go make like you think of the clip in the Super Bowl where a few years ago where what's his name? Sean McVay. He says Aaron Donald's going to go make a play, and Aaron Donald, pressures Joe Burrow and sacks him or throws incomplete or whatever, and they win the Super Bowl. I don't think Georgia's got that guy in the past few years where you can say, "Hey, this guy's going to go get a sack on this play." And I think some of that is scheme. They don't necessarily prioritize pass rushing first. You see a guy like Trayvon Walker whose sack numbers didn't blow you away in college, and he's having success in the NFL. Michael Williams could do the same thing. So, Nolan Smith wasn't a guy who had a ton of sacks in college, but he tested off the charts at the combine and has had a great playoff run with the Eagles. So, I think when you look at defensive linemen, I think they signed some of those guys in the 25 class. You look at Elijah Griffin, who was a 5-star, as an example, but I think this class is more about the defensive linemen too, but the outside linebackers that like the Nolan Smiths, right? Like the Jalen Walkers who can really get after the quarterback in a variety of ways.
Jed, when you made the comment about Sean McVay making that statement to Aaron Donald, not necessarily was the Notre Dame player who came off the edge in that category by any stretch, but he was the guy in the moment, obviously, and at the first half, in what might have been the play that ended Georgia's season, even though the game wasn't anywhere close to being over. That obviously just turned the scales in Notre Dame's favor. So you were talking about offensive line play and it not being as tightened up in the last few years as it's been. Was that more recruiting? Like if we looked at the recruiting rankings, or is it more development?
I think it's some of both. I think, and I've only covered recruiting for a few years, so I think I'm be the best person to answer it. But like, I feel like there haven't been as many guys who have come out of high school and been like, this guy is a day one starter. Like Andrew Thomas, when he came out of high school, he started day one at Georgia, pretty much. Guy like Broderick Jones, you thought could be a day one starter. And I don't know, one, that there have been that many guys like that, but two, NIL can spread all these guys out. Instead of one team landing 2 or 3 5-stars, they're diluting the talent out, which is good, I think, overall for college football. But when you're a team like Georgia, then it's like, okay, we got to get some of these guys, and then you got to develop. And Monroe, there's the 22 and 23 classes didn't pan out that great because you had some guys leave. You had a guy, Kelton Smith, who medically retired, and Ernest Green has been a hit from 22, but he struggled this past year due to injuries. Monroe Freeling has been a guy from 2023 who has mostly played well, and then that Sugar Bowl was just an abomination when he had to play left tackle. So, and I think this year you look at it, spinning it to the team side a little bit, you lose Tate Ratledge, you lose Dylan Fairchild, you're going to be on your third different center in 3 years. You lose Xavier Truss, who has been there for a decade, it feels like. So it's the time for those classes to really step up. And there's some guys who've got talent, but don't necessarily have a lot of experience. So I think spring practice is going to be very interesting because I truly think all 5 spots probably are wide open.